Welcome in, everyone. You are in Unspoken Real Talk, and we have a special guest. I say special because he's special to me. We have Bill Lester, NASCAR's second African American driver.
Oh, no. We
No?
can't start out like that. No.
Okay.
There were black drivers in NASCAR even before Wendell Scott. Wendell Scott got the most notoriety because he won, right,
Mhm.
in the early 60s, but he was not the first. And since Wendell raced in Cup, Willie T. Ribbs raced in Cup before me, and I followed Willie T. So when I came on, I think I was like the sixth black driver to race at the top level of NASCAR. So we can't claim that I'm the second.
So, this is what I like about having conversations with fellow historians, as I like to call them, because I just did a book, a little known Black history facts from 1865 to 2000, and I keep learning every time I talk to somebody. So I'm a sponge. I take everything in, and I just find it interesting. The more you talk to people, the more you learn stuff that people didn't know about. I mean, people
Yeah,
didn't know.
absolutely. Along those lines, I mean, you remember Tom Joyner, right?
Mhm.
Okay, well, Tom Joyner had something called like little known Black history fact. And I was one of those little known Black history facts because back then when I was on the scene, most Black folks didn't really follow NASCAR or know much about NASCAR, but he would consider or call me a little known Black history fact because I was out there doing it. So, yeah, I mean, we're learning every day. All of us are. I mean, that's part of the beauties of being alive. And so if there are things that I need to course correct you with, I hope you won't take offense.
No. I always said when I worked at State Farm, when they did our audits, that when they found something wrong, other coworkers would get upset. But if you don't get the correct information to fix what you're doing, then how do you know not to stop doing it?
Exactly.
So I take it, but this is all about you sharing with us being an African American male with our stigma of mental health that we have. I when you hear men's mental health, what comes to your mind as far as a male in our mental health age now, where we were conditioned not to show weakness? As a man, you're supposed to shoulder everything. You're not supposed to cry. Basically, they just say suck it up and keep going.
Well, heck, you pretty much took the words out of my mouth. That's kind of what it came down to. I mean, my father was kind of like the pillar of strength, and I kind of watched and emulated how he behaved. And I mean, it was just men are supposed to be strong. Men are supposed to, like you said, suck it up. Keep digging, that sort of thing. I mean, we were not supposed to be crying, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the way I was brought up, and it's unfortunate that that's the case because there are a lot of Black males that are shouldering a lot and going through it. Fortunately, I haven't really had to deal with anything that's been too monumental or detrimental. I mean, my going through my NASCAR career obviously wasn't easy, right? But I just look. If I didn't go through the front door, then I went through the back door, and I always found a way to get to where I needed to go, right? And I always believe that where there's a will, there's a way. But it wasn't easy because it's not as if I was embraced being out there on the racing circuit because they kind of felt that NASCAR, stock car racing was like their last bastion of white supremacy. I mean, if we're going to talk about race, that's kind of what I have to share is that they looked at me up and down and, left and right. And it's kind of like, why are you here? That sort of thing. But I had strong conviction that I was given a gift and it was up to me to see it through, to live my dream. And, by his will, I was able to do that.
So you actually answered one of my questions that I had for you, being an African American male in that sport. How did you get through? because I didn't think it would be easy because I was called the N word at Martinsville.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm just a bystander, watching the race, and for you to be actually in the thick of it, that had to be hard.
Absolutely. And, we don't have enough time for all the stories, but, this hat I'm wearing, Winning in Reverse, basically is promoting my book, which
I was going to
is,
say the book.
yeah, Winning in Reverse. And I share a whole lot of stories about what it was to be me on an island. They just did not want to welcome me, really. By and large, I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying by and large, right? There were some folks that were happy to see me, and I was very grateful that that was the case, right? But you talked about Martinsville. There were only 2 tracks on the circuit that booed me during driver introductions, and one of them was Martinsville. So I wholeheartedly understand what it must have felt like for you. Here I am, just look, I'm trying to do best I can, race for my team, race for my sponsors, anything. Y'all booing me for no reason whatsoever, just because of my skin color. And then the other track was Talladega. Again, Talladega, oh my gosh, that's the only track on the circuit with an infield jail, right? Because almost the way the fans looked at it is like, okay, we come here to drink and to party. And oh, by the way, there's a race going on, right? So it was very difficult being there. Just my whole story of coming from the Northwest to the Southeast and the change that I had to undergo, and I had to try to understand was very difficult, because coming from the West Coast, very liberal, people refer to each other by first name. It wasn't like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. It wasn't any Bible Belt situation. It was very, very progressive. I come from a high-tech Silicon Valley background. I have an electrical engineering and computer science degree from Cal Berkeley, and I worked for 15 years in the high-tech sector before, with my wife's blessing and support, I made the transition to try to make it to become a professional race car driver. And that was at 37 years of age. So anyway, I was very familiar with the progressive high-tech industry. And I had done some amateur racing and a few pro races up until the point where we left. But when we came to the Southeast, it was culture shock for me, just like it must have been for those in the NASCAR industry, seeing a black man coming into their garage and, with a helmet, as opposed to, somebody who might be sweeping the floors or something like that. I was the one that they were going to be nutting and bolting and building race cars for me to compete with. So it was very, very much of an eye opener for both of them as well as it was for me. I come without a Southern drawl, and, all these guys were kind of talking the same way, and they had similar backgrounds and experiences. A lot of the crew that I worked with did not even have a high school diploma, let alone a college degree like I had, right? I can remember when I first tested for the team that I started out with, Bobby Hamilton Racing, out of Mount Juliet, Tennessee. They looked forward to places to eat like Cracker Barrel and Crystal. These are restaurants that did not exist on the West Coast, right? So I'm like, what is a Cracker Barrel and what is a Crystal, right? So that was a baptism by fire. And then when I came out, I used what they considered to be multisyllabic words, just a language and a dialogue they were not used to. And I remember one time on the radio, when I was telling about how my vehicle was performing, they were like, there was silence, and they were like, what are you talking about? And they said, just kind of dummy it down, just, use simple words so we understand what you're saying, right? And so it was just a very, very substantial cultural divide that I had to navigate. These were folks that, lived out on farms and stuff like that. I come from a more suburban background when I grew up in Northern California, the Bay Area. And so, I remember one time distinctly that I was at the shop, and I was visiting the guys and the team, and we were having lunch. And one of the guys was talking about, like, for example, man, I'm having so much trouble with my Cub Cadet, and I was like, and I should have probably never done this, but I said, what's a Cub Cadet? And they all stopped and looked at me like I had 2 heads, because I didn't know what a riding mower was, a riding lawnmower, a Cub Cadet. Because out in California, you don't have acres of land, unless you're out there in, the outskirts. And I wasn't. Like I said, I grew up in the suburbs. I mean, we only needed to have a push mower, not even a power mower, but a regular push mower to mow our grass, which is the size of a postage stamp, right? And these guys are out there tilling the fields and on riding mowers, and I didn't know what the heck one was, right? So that gives you an idea of just how different their background was from my background. And so needless to say, there was a lot of hostility and resentment when I was out there behind the wheel of a race car, because I'm sure a lot of them were saying, well, this guy's taking a seat that should be mine. I should be behind the wheel of a race car, because I'm the one who's supposedly paid these dues, not realizing that I had paid my own dues. I had raced at the amateur level, won championships. Then I raced at the pro level in sports cars, road racing, not in a stock car, but had done extremely well, right? So I had paid those dues. And then what gave me my big break is that Dodge created a diversity program in the very early 2000s. And this was an opportunity for me to race professionally without having to bring a checkbook. Most of the drivers had to bring both a helmet and a checkbook to pay for their ride. I only had to bring a helmet because Dodge had spent the money to set up this program for the most qualified driver through a gong show. Basically, I call it a gong show because they brought out a whole bunch of people of color and gave them the opportunity to demonstrate what they had. And so I won that competition. And as a result of that, that's what gave me my initial foray into NASCAR. Not thinking in a million years when I was growing up, I would ever be coming to the Deep South to run around in a circle, right? I couldn't really understand NASCAR when I was growing up. I thought that my career, my future would lead me towards Indy cars like the Indy 500 or sports car, the highest level of sports car racing, like the 24 Hours of Daytona or the 24 Hours of Le Mans, France. That's where I thought my career would go. But lo and behold, as I saw the future growth of motorsports just leaning heavily in the direction of NASCAR, I wanted to be where the action was. I wanted to be where the best of the best was, where I could make the biggest name for myself and the biggest impact. And that's what brought my wife and I out to Atlanta. And then when I say Atlanta, it wasn't even to North Carolina. The home of NASCAR is really North Carolina, whether it be Charlotte or Mooresville. But my wife and I, we took a look at that area back in 2000, and we just saw, rolling fields and, just country living. And we're like, oh no, we can't do this. If we're coming
out
of
a Green Acres type thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, we were like, if we're going to do this and come out to the Deep South, we're going to have to come to a place where there at least is a major metropolitan area with multicultural, diversity and opportunities. And we saw Atlanta. And so that's why we settled on Atlanta. And so I had to commute to the race team in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and, other teams that I've raced for in North Carolina. I just commuted because it's like, we weren't going to live out there. I just didn't feel comfortable. You're talking about the guy who never grew up oval track racing on dirt, which is what the NASCAR drivers say they all have in common. They all grew up on dirt, on short tracks. Well, I didn't. I never even, to this day in my life, never been to a short track, into a dirt track, right? Never seen what it's like to get, that clay in your teeth. I don't know what that's like. I basically took my skills and abilities from road racing and adapted them to NASCAR. So, yeah, I mean, it was very different because I just wasn't embraced. They wondered why I was there. They couldn't understand it. I didn't look like them. I didn't sound like them. But you know what? I was going to make it.
I'm going to ask this. I think I'm correct, but I told you I'm open to correction. You have done 24 hours of Rolex, right?
Absolutely. Before I came to stock cars and NASCAR, like I said, my career was built on amateur road racing and then some pro, road races like the 24 Hours of Daytona. I'm a veteran of 10 of those races, believe it or not. And, I'm thinking that that's where my career is going to go. But the problem I saw was that both in open wheel racing as well as sports car road racing, there became a division in the sanctioning body. And what that happens is it splits the fan base because some folks think that road racing should be one way. Other folks think it should be another way. Same thing with open wheel. And so CART, became like, or I can't remember what the sanctioning body was for open wheel, but they became like IRL, the international, the racing league, the Indy Racing League.
Indy, yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, IRL. But there was also another sanctioning body for open wheel. And like I said, folks that were fans of open wheel racing didn't know whether or not to follow IRL or the other sanctioning body. And then when the open wheel racing series is split, so is the, I got a pop up here. I don't know why I got a pop up. Uh-oh, don't tell me I've lost you. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, I don't know what's going on, but I got some silly little pop up. I don't know where you went to, but I'm looking for you.
So I see you.
I got a pop up for like spam or something like that. And now all of a sudden I don't see where, let me see. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. All right. So once again, the fans don't know where to find their drivers, right? And the races they want to see. Is it going to be on like ESPN for the IRL versus like NBC or CBS for the other sanctioning body? And the same thing happened to sports car racing, right? It was IMSA, and then it became like American Le Mans Series and Grand Am. You know, they split the fan base, right? And so what happened is that their numbers dove. They took a dive. And when the numbers dive and the popularity starts to wane, NASCAR just picked up the pieces and started running with it, right? That was the best thing in the world for them because the growth of their sport continued to flourish because their fan base was not divided. They all knew where to go to watch the races and everything. Plus, they had way more races than open wheel racing and IndyCar. And so everybody knew where to watch their favorite drivers and teams and all that kind of stuff in NASCAR. So when I was coming out to make a way in NASCAR, I was like, you know, I need to be in NASCAR because this is where the action is. This is where the growth of the sport is and all that sort of thing. And so that's why I chose that direction.
I still see the 23 waste management, but you know, that's just because got just going around the track. We got the actual car, the full size one, got it signed. It's sitting up there. I think I sent you a picture. It's up there with the Bubba Wallace one. So okay. We got them all.
Both of us are 23. Number 23.
Yes, 23. I was like, I just want Bubba to continue to be the best Bubba he can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It hasn't been easy for him either. I mean, just like, you know, we all stand on those that came before us. You know, Willie T made it easier for me. I made it easier for Bubba, you know, and he's making it easier for Raja Caruth, right? So there's a few guys in the pipeline. You know, LeVar Scott is in line after Raja. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that there are more of us. We're not an anomaly like we once were. But the thing that makes it still so much more difficult is that the playing field's not level. What I mean by that is that you got to have the resources behind you to be able to compete at the top levels. And that access to capital is something that we, as, you know, African Americans still struggle to gain because we're not the ones typically in corporate America who are making those 7 and 8 figure decisions, right? We have that budget where it's like, you know, we can split off 5 or 6 figures, right, for whatever that effort is. But when you're talking about NASCAR and the top level of NASCAR, which is the Cup Series, you know, that's a $18-20 million proposition in sponsorship per year, right? So we're not talking about, you know, a general manager making those decisions. We're talking about the vice president of marketing or the CMO or whoever it is at a Fortune 500 company making those decisions. And typically we just don't have access to them like they do. So it becomes very, very difficult. But, you know, again, like I said before, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, you don't go through, if you are not able to go through the front door, you try to go through the back or whatever it is. You know, I mean, a lot of the reason I've been successful in my career is due to networking. You know, I mentioned in Winning in Reverse that there were 8 keys to my being successful and being able to live my dream as being a professional race car driver. And passion is number 1. If I didn't have the passion to be a race car driver, I would have quit a long time ago because I've been discouraged just about at every turn, right? But just as important almost is networking. And, you know, if you don't have the ability to do it yourself, you got to be in the room. You got to be basically, you know, rubbing shoulders and, you know, pressing flesh with those that have that access to capital or can open the doors to those people that have the capital, right? You got to be in what's called a TRE, I call it, a target-rich environment, where there are movers and shakers that have the financial wherewithal to support you in your dreams, right? Because one of the things I talk about with professional racing, which is probably the same thing with almost any professional sport, is that it's politics first, business second, and sport third. What do I mean by that? Well, the politics of it is that you have to get in that room where you have an opportunity to move to the second phase, which is the business side of it. Hopefully you're fortunate enough to meet somebody who believes in you enough to give you a form, right? Then you got to go to them with a proposal, which is why they would spend this amount of capital on you when they could spend that kind of capital on anything else, right? Pro beach volleyball or, tiddlywinks, whatever. Why NASCAR, right? So that's the business aspect of it. And then the third of it is sport. And what I mean, at the end of the day, if you're fortunate enough to get past step 1 and step 2, you get to put your helmet on and do what it is that you were meant to do. I always thought early on that the racing was the hard part. No, the racing is the easy part. When you finally get the opportunity to be there, with that opportunity that was given to you, with that chance that somebody took on you, you got to deliver. And that is the sport of it, right? That's the part that fortunately for me came easiest, right? That was the part that I was naturally gifted with, was the ability of car control, knowing when a car is on the ragged edge and just about to spin out before it does. Now, that's not to say I haven't crashed. I mean, it's just like every other race car driver, we've all crashed, but you're trying to keep those crashes to a minimum. And those that can go fastest without crashing are the ones that typically become professional. But again, becoming professional means that you got to have that money along with your helmet. And so, yeah, it's not easy. Most people look at racing and go, oh, it's easy. All you got to do is, go around a circle track or whatever the case is. Looks like a Sunday drive, but no, I mean, to get there, to get that opportunity to do that, most of us go through hell.
I was going to say, are you the one selling yourself as a driver, or is there a PR person that goes in for you to get that sponsorship?
It comes through a variety of different ways, but let me tell you, every driver who's out there, unless you're a complete household name, like Dale Jr. isn't going out there and picking up the phone. But if he's got his team trying to close a deal, you can best believe he's in the room or he's on the phone. For myself, I mean, I was on the phone relentlessly, and sending out stuff myself and following up with, people that were helping me. But, I didn't have the financial wherewithal to really have a big PR and marketing arm working for me. When I was racing for teams, I assisted those teams that had that in place. But I mean, it comes by many different forms and facets. There is no one way to go about doing it, So a lot of the guys that are trying to make it, they don't have the ability to hire a PR team. They're out there, cold calling and doing whatever it is, sending out proposals on their own, So it's very difficult, because one of the things I realized is that the shotgun approach to sponsorship typically doesn't work. You typically have to go through that networking. So you have somebody who's in a, position to receive your call and to take it seriously, because the people that are making those decisions, they're bombarded with, like I said, every opportunity to spend their marketing dollars any which way they want to. But if they're willing to receive your call and are expecting to receive your call, that goes a whole lot further than, hey, I'm going to dial up, Johnson & Johnson or, General Mills and hope for the best, because all you are there is another person who's trying to get their dollars. But if they are ready to receive you, then you got a form by which you can hopefully put your best foot forward.
I've always wanted to go to, which I will, and I can say this, I will probably never go to Talladega, just because I still don't think a person of color is welcome at Talladega. That's just me. But when you had to go to Talladega and push that noise back, how did you process the boos and the not welcoming?
Yeah, by focusing in on the task at hand, believing in myself, realizing I was there for a reason. I had proven myself, and whether or not they want to believe that or not is inconsequential. It's really self-belief and confidence that I can do the job. But it wasn't as if I was hanging around the infield with the good old boys, throwing down beers with them afterwards. Because I mean, I was not. I was strictly going to the track, getting to my hauler with my team as quickly as I could, doing what I had to do on track, and then getting in the car and going back to the hotel or wherever I was staying,
Mm-hmm.
it was an A to B situation, because I knew, especially at that time, all those rebel flags, just blowing, proudly in the breeze, that I wasn't who they were trying to see. So, it made it difficult. You really want to always be in a welcoming environment when you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, not everybody had a beef with me or had an issue with me. Like I said, some people were like, man, we're glad you're here. They saw the talent I had. They saw how I conducted myself. I never spoke ill of the fans or NASCAR or anything like that. I told them I was glad to be there and what have you. And some people really took to that and they supported me. But that was a minority. The majority of folks, we're talking 20 years ago now, 25 years ago, we're not trying to see me. But, again, I never doubted myself. I knew I was, given a gift, and it was up to me to see it through. And I'm glad that I never quit, because I didn't want to live a life of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Maybe I should have done it. Maybe I should have taken a chance, that sort of thing. Like I said, with my wife's blessing, I was able to make that leap and see if it was going to work. But, it wasn't as if she was saying, okay, well, you can try to do this indefinitely. We had a plan. I had to make it within a 3-year time frame, or it was back to Northern California and back to the Silicon Valley and back to the high-tech job. And Lord knows I did not want to do that. So I did everything I could to make this opportunity pay off.
Well, I know that you worked for an engineering company. We won't put the name out there. What was it that made you want to, I know you wanted to race, but how did you know that was what you wanted to do? Were you doing that as a small child, or?
Yeah, racing was my passion. And, when I was very young, my parents told me I didn't go anywhere without a Matchbox or a Hot Wheels car in my hand, right? Mm-hmm. And I always loved seeing racing on TV when I was very young. And when I had my Stingray bike and I was racing kids in the neighborhood, I was always trying to be the fastest. I was just obsessed with speed, and my father took me to a race when I was 8 years old. We went to a race at Monterey, a track called Laguna Seca, and watched some Can-Am cars go around, a series that doesn't even exist anymore, right? So this is so long ago. This was,
let's not age us.
Yeah, well, it's about, late 60s. And I got bit by the bug. That's what did it. When I saw those cars blowing by me at 160, 170 miles an hour, the sight, the sound of that power, 900 horsepower, and the smells, that came from, whether it was burning rubber or oil or brakes, brake smells. I just loved it. I was just intoxicated with all that. And I was like, I want to be a race car driver, but I didn't know if I could do it, because when I looked around, nobody looked like me. Mm-hmm. My dad and I were just pretty much the only ones that were of color that we could see when we looked left and we looked right. So, but that set the hook. My dad set the hook for me, and I knew I wanted to be a race car driver. But, my parents didn't know anything about it. And so it wasn't as if they were in a position to give me a go-kart, which is one of the common denominators amongst most race car drivers, that they're given a race car or a cart at a very young age, single digit age, right? To go out there and see whether or not they had what it took. I didn't get that opportunity, right? But I always followed racing, whether it was in the magazines my dad brought home, like Road and Track and Car and Driver, or whether it was on ABC's Wide World of Sports. They show the Talladega 500 or they show the Indy 500 or whatever the case is. I was watching it. I was front and center because I had a passion for it. And it was very clear that, it was something that I wasn't into the NFL, wasn't into the NBA and all that kind of stuff like most of my friends were, but I was into everything racing. And then, again, I just got my driver's license, and it was the Fast and the Furious before it was a movie for me. Or somebody else, take it to a racetrack. And I was like, well, I'd love to. How do I get there? They said, well, you got to buy a race car. Well, like I said, my parents were in a position to buy me one. And that's what led me to engineering school, because I didn't have a passion for engineering, but I chose the profession I thought that could get me to where I needed to go in the shortest amount of time. So I chose one of the hardest engineering schools in the country. I chose Cal Berkeley, second MIT, and that's where I went. And after getting my butt kicked for 4 years, I started out in the high-tech sector and, started out as a software development engineer, and then wound up to be a research and development project manager And I was successful by everybody's definition but my own. I define success as happiness, not how much money you make, because I was back then, I was six figures, right? I should have been happy by everybody's definition, I guess, but I was miserable because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do with my life, which was racing cars. And so, like I said, wife and I got married, and she knew racing was what I wanted to do. And she told me one day, "Hun, you're not getting any younger or any easier to live with. Let's see if we can make this dream of yours a reality, or say that you gave it your best shot and it wasn't meant to be." And that's what led me to, my journey to NASCAR.
So when the diversity program came out, what part did you play in with the diversity in NASCAR?
Well, I was before the formal NASCAR diversity program, what's called D4D, Drive for Diversity, right? I was actually with Brad Doherty, ex-NBA player, who was team owner. We were on something called the NASCAR Diversity Council. So we were responsible for helping NASCAR create opportunities for more people to become involved in the sport, whether it be a driver, whether it be crew or on a team, or, whether it be just more fan engagement, right? We were trying to direct NASCAR as to how to make the sport more inclusive, right? So I was before the Drive for Diversity. The product of the Drive for Diversity are guys like Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson, who's got Japanese background, Daniel Swartz, who's got Hispanic Latino background, right? So I did not benefit from the Drive for Diversity, but I was part of, the group that conceived it and created it.
I think about this. I've been a Milka Duna fan for a minute.
Milka Duna.
Oh, Mr. Milka Duna. And I think about that because there's a new young lady. I just heard her voice this during Daytona weekend racing, but I can't remember what her name was. But I know
this year.
Yeah.
So you're talking about Destiny Spurlock?
Yeah, we have a female back in the mix, so that's interesting.
Very interesting because she's no spring chicken. She was a former drag bike racer. And she's also got some open wheel experience. I think she was in like a Barber Dodge or some kind of program, Skip Barber program with open wheel cars. So she's done that as well. And now in, her mid 30s, she's going to NASCAR racing. She says that she's always been a NASCAR fan, but she doesn't have, any experience yet. She's gaining that, but she hopes to make her debut in the ARCA series at the end of this month. So, we'll see how that goes.
And again, similar to your story, following your dream. This is what I want to do. Age didn't have anything to do with it. This is my time, and this is when it fits for me. So I'm going to go out and do it. Have you ever driven or wanted to drive an Indy car?
So it's interesting. I told you about the Dodge Diversity Program, which gave me my shot in NASCAR. Back when CART was trying to broaden their net and bring in more people of color, they created what was called the CART African American Driver Development Program. And so what they did is another gong show, right? Where I was brought in with a couple other experienced open wheel drivers. I had no open wheel experience. And we were brought out to a track in mid-California, Buttonwillow, and we were sat inside what's called a Toyota Formula Atlantic car to test with an established team to see who had the talent to possibly become an IndyCar driver. And so I showed up with these two other guys. I smoked them. And my reward for that was an Indy Lights test, which is a stepping stone to IndyCar. So while I'd never competed in an open wheel race, I've been able to, and fortunate enough to test open wheel cars. And when I got that opportunity, the prize to test that Indy Lights car with Team Cool Green, which is one of the top teams at that time, I was less than 0.2 of a second off of their full-time current driver. And so there's no question that I could do it. But to my dismay, when the results were brought back to CART, which is the sanctioning body, Championship Auto Racing Teams, which sponsored the whole event, they said, "Okay, Bill, we see that you can do it. Here's the report. There's, no question. now all you got to do is bring $2 million with you and we'll try to find you a ride. I was like, what? I thought the whole purpose of this was to determine if there was somebody ready to go. I clearly, established that I improved, that I am. And now you tell me I got to bring a checkbook? After that, I was done with open wheel. But I did get the chance to test Indy Lights and prove that I had the ability. And, unfortunately, the prize wasn't there at the end of the rainbow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Right. Joke was on me, apparently, because I thought I was going IndyCar racing, right? Which is kind of where I wanted to go ever since, I was a kid, is like IndyCar. I wanted to drive, Indy 500 and all the road courses that the Indy cars drive and stuff like that. But once that happened, I really got sour from open wheel. And that's when I, started focusing my direction on NASCAR. Because I saw the growth of NASCAR anyway. So it's like, all they did was just make me more determined to make it in NASCAR.
Wow. I see what you're saying, because I don't really, off the top of my head, recall a schedule being out. I'm sure there's one out with the races for this year, but I'm automatic to look for NASCAR schedule to see when it is, because I want to go see the Roval before they take it away. They said that they were going to do away with it. That's in Concord.
I think they've already gotten rid of the Roval, unless this is the last year. Yeah, they're going to San Diego for a road course, right? And I think that might have taken the Roval away, because there was a lot of folks complaining about the Roval. They didn't like the Roval race, And anytime you do a makeshift road course out of an oval track, it
was different.
Yeah, but I think this track in San Diego on this naval base or whatever it is going to be pretty exciting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. But who knows? I haven't seen the full schedule. You may be right. There might be one more year, at the Charlotte Roval.
That was as close as I got to a real one, because I wanted to go to Watkins Glen, but hadn't gotten there yet. It's on the bucket list, but hadn't gotten there yet.
Yeah, love that track. Love the Glen. My favorite road course is Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, but Watkins Glen is right up there.
I was getting ready to ask you, did you have a favorite track that you look forward to going to without, all the noise and stuff? Is there one that, that was on the list that you couldn't wait to get to?
Yeah, well, people always ask me, what were my favorite tracks in sports car road racing. Was definitely Road America. I love Road America. But Watkins Glen, like I said, was a close second. I really like Watkins Glen. I like real purpose-built road courses and stuff like that with great terrain, elevation change and all that kind of stuff, and just picturesque, right? And then people ask me, okay, what was your favorite oval track? And, I didn't grow up on short tracks, half miles and stuff like that, bull rings. Most of my experience was always 2.5, 3.5, 4 mile road courses where you turn right, you turn left, that sort of thing. And so I was always most comfortable on the big tracks. So Talladega and Daytona were my favorite tracks. I never had the greatest of success there. Most of my greatest success in NASCAR came on intermediate tracks, the 1.5 mile tracks. I had pole positions at Kansas and Kentucky, and at it was Lowe's Motor Speedway back there, but then, but it's now Charlotte Motor Speedway. But I've had pole positions on all three of those tracks, but I've led laps at Daytona. But I've always liked the drafting tracks, because there's nothing like going like maybe 180, 185 miles an hour all by yourself. And then when you pick up the draft, that's like 10 or 12 miles an hour faster, right? It's almost like they sweep you up on a cushion of air. It's so hard to explain, but it's almost like, you're just cruising around. And next thing you know, the RPMs go up and, you just feel like you're smoking into the corners, and, you're so close with everybody. It's such a great rate of speed, door handle to door handle and fender to fender. It's a lot of fun, but boy, I tell you, I've had a lot of disappointment. I've led laps there, like I said before, and had tire blowouts and failures and, whatever the case might be. So I was never lucky there, but I always liked the big tracks. The drafting tracks were my favorites.
Well, as a fan that screams at the TV, the Daytona ones, I'm holding my breath. How do you sit in a car like that, in that pack, not knowing what's going to happen in the next 2 seconds? because I'm always sitting there going, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then when it happens, I'm like, ah,
Yeah.
especially when you take out my driver.
No, as drivers, we are so focused on the task at hand, that we don't have time to be worried about, the big one or whatever the case is. We know that's in the back of our mind. It's, oftentimes inevitable. It's part of what happens with, drafting and plate racing, as I like to call it back then. But you're so engaged on what's going on. You don't really realize the speed you're going and just how close you are to everybody else until like a caution comes out. When a caution comes out and you can actually start breathing again, you're like, dang, this 60, 70 miles an hour, whatever you're doing behind the pace car, seems like you're crawling. I mean, absolutely crawling. And then you realize, wow, this place is big. There are fans in the stands. I mean, we don't even realize that exists when we're at the task at hand, because we're so focused on beating the competition, realizing what your vehicle's doing, what adjustments I need to go faster, in terms of what's holding me back. How can the crew help me? How can they improve this thing? And just watching everything that's going on in your vehicle, like, my oil pressure good? Is my water temperature good? Listening to your spotter telling you, about things that are going on and lanes that may open or may shut or whatever the case is. You're not worried about that. I mean, it's just, 3-4 hours, whatever the case is, of just intense racing. And you don't realize how spent you are until after the race is done. I've had to have, IVs and stuff like that, injected in me because I'm totally spent. I mean, I've been in races on hot days where I'll lose, 7 or 8 pounds in just sweat. I'll take my fire suit off, put it on a hanger, and it's just dripping sweat at the bottom of the leg of the fire suit, and you're just sitting in it, but you don't even really trip off of it because you're so focused at it, and the good thing is that we have, a helmet blower, which blows 10 degrees cooler than ambient air into your helmet, right? So if it's 90 degrees outside, then it's blowing 80-degree air into your helmet. And the way your body works is that if your mind thinks it's cool, then it thinks your body is cool. I mean, you can almost be on fire, but if your mind is cool, then you're okay. You don't realize you're sweating like you are, unless, like I said, you're behind a pace car or whatever the case is, or after you're done. But no, I mean, the intensity is so ratcheted up that people just don't, they think it's like a Sunday drive, right? It's like, what radio station are you listening to, or, whatever the case is. It's like, no, you don't even focus on anything that's going on around you unless you're at reduced speed, because it's so intense on the track. There's, 35, 38, 40 other lunatics out there trying to beat each other, right? So there is no time for, goofing around or goofing off or whatever the case is. It's intense.
So compared to Daytona and the 24 hours, which one takes more out of you?
Oh, the Talladega Daytona, the drafting takes more out of you. I mean, the road racing is very intense, but in a 24-hour race, you have 3 or 4 teammates, 2 to 3 other guys, a team of either 3 or 4 that are breaking up that 24 hours, right?
Okay.
So you might have a stint where you're driving for maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, or you might double stint. You might race as long as maybe 3 hours, but then you're out, right? And you're relaxing, you're taking it easy, that sort of thing. And the pace in an endurance race isn't, foot to the floor the whole way like it is in a stock car, because you're accelerating and you're braking, right? Upshifting, downshifting, stuff like that. But the intensity is intense, don't get me wrong, but you're not spent, especially emotionally and mentally, like you are like at a drafting track. It's very mentally exhausting, because you're all these scenarios that you're trying to deal with, and you're trying to be proactive and not reactive. You're trying to see things that are going to happen that might put you in jeopardy, or that, might cause the big one. And, what's my out? What do I do here? That sort of thing. Whereas in sports car racing, it's like you're just trying to run to a pace, right? You're trying to run to a lap time, because, if you're trying to run a qualifying lap, every lap, you're going to burn the car to the ground. Now, I say that because my last Rolex 24 was in 2001, I think, right? But they're telling me now, that they're almost racing full out the whole way. because the cars are so much better. They're so much more reliable, and everything is so much more robust. Before, cars were breaking all the time. Now they don't break that much at all. So the intensity might be a slight bit different now than it was then. But I will still say that there's a huge difference between being in a pack at 20 or 25 cars as opposed to you're going wheel to wheel into a corner with one or two other guys, right? There's a big difference there.
With the 24 hours, by it being different than NASCAR, was you received different than you were with NASCAR? Or, I mean, was it the same or?
No, unequivocally, it was different because road racing, sports car racing is more international, right? You got drivers from all over the world coming over. And so everybody's a different blend, different mix, got folks from Europe, got folks from South America, Mexico, whatever the case is, Canada, like I said, Europe, China, whatever the case is, right? And so and the folks that watch it and embrace it are just as international. And the crews, the teams are just as international. So it's not like all white, right? It is an international melting pot. And so, yeah, I mean, I was just another driver. I wasn't, sure, I was black. They knew I was black, but they didn't treat me like I was black or I was less than or whatever the case is, right? So it was a much more comfortable environment at a Rolex or a sports car race, in general, than it ever was in a NASCAR race.
I went to my first 24 hours a couple years ago, and I saw maybe 6 of it, and the rest of it I slept through. I missed most of it. It's like, whoops.
Yeah. After a while, the cars are just droning around, right? So, and then when it turns dark, you don't know where your favorite driver and car is because it's just a bunch of headlights and stuff like that. So it becomes increasingly more difficult to stay awake and attentive during a 24-hour race than it does 3 or 4 hours.
I missed it.
Yeah.
I went to the mall. I shopped. I mean, I I can say I saw one, that I've been to one. So I still got that list of stuff that I want to do before I won't say goodbye to racing, but I'm just, won't be as active because I noticed that I have scaled back a lot myself because you were talking about the fans in the stand. The first year I went to Daytona, that whole backside had not the entire backside, but that right, what is it? 1, 2, turn 2 had seats. And now there's no seats.
No, it's not like it used to be. I mean,
Richmond has no seats. You can see it all the way out the backside. Martinsville has no seats.
Yeah, it's crazy because, I mean, when I was racing there in NASCAR, it was kind of like, I like to say the heyday, because you would see on a cup race 140, 160,000 fans. Now, if you get 60 to 70,000 fans there, that's good attendance. And if you look at the numbers from the networks, they're way off. I mean, way off. Now, folks that are fans have much variety in terms of how they can watch, because it's not just network TV. Now they're streaming and, YouTube or whatever the case is, the different platforms that they can watch the race. So it's almost unfair to say, okay, well, NBC had this many, or, Fox, whatever the case is, had this many fans back 10 years ago, and now they have so many less now. And it's because, again, the way that they can enjoy the race is different. So it's hard to compare apples to apples, but still your barometer, just like you said, is if you go to a track where you saw those grandstands on the back side, on the back stretch, they're not there. Either they've been yanked out or they have put like signage and sponsorship banners over.
Yeah. All the way across. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same.
And I didn't have to wait for somebody to die to get a ticket to Bristol. I mean, you can get a ticket to Bristol, and you can get a ticket to Bristol for $50. So that's scary.
Yeah, and same day. Before you had to have a lead time to get tickets to Bristol. Now, just like you said, you could go up on race day and get a ticket, which is crazy. It never used to be like that, but. I'm telling you, the technological age that we've come into, where a lot of people's engagement takes place on their cell phone, on their smartphone, has really changed, the attention level and desire of people to go to live events. They just don't go to live events anymore. They don't want to sit out in the sun. You know, when you're
Don't
at
want to
home,
get hot. They
yeah,
don't want
exactly.
to pay $50 for a beer and a hot dog. So
Yeah, and when you're there live, you don't get the replays. You don't get to see everything that took place leading up to it. If you're not paying particular attention, you're like, okay, they crashed. What happened? Right? You
yeah.
don't see that, right? But if you're at home, you see everything that led up to it. You get all the analysis from the commentators and the broadcasters and all that kind of stuff. It's so easy not to go.
But like you said, the attendance is down. And the thing that got me is when they removed the trailers, and they made like when they were in Richmond, and they made like this big shopping tent, and you'd go into the tent, and I'm like, but I was used to going to, Bill Lester's trailer or Carl Edwards' trailer. We would walk around looking for them so we could shop, and then you got like this little mini mall in the middle of the thing, and I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm a creature of habit because it's changed. I couldn't deal with the change that they were. I think I was one of the people that when they did the stages and all that stuff, when they started kicking those in, I'm like, eh.
Yeah, and most fans are creatures of habit, and that's why they're having such a hard time coming to the track now. They got drivers now they can't relate with. A lot of these kids are like, trust fund kids, right? They did not grow up blue collar. Like they did, like the fans did, right? And the fans have a hard time identifying with these kids that come off of a simulator. They're out there learning how to race on a simulator. And when they crash, they just hit the reset button, and then they start racing again. I mean, when I was going through it, if you crashed, you had a crew that was not happy with you and you were, out of the race because, your vehicle's done. Right now, they just do that in a simulator. And then when they go out there to the racetrack, it just proves what they already learned. It's a whole different vibe, and a lot of the old drivers, they started leaving the sport because they couldn't embrace the technology that was necessary to go fast. Before it was all pretty much, hand waving and seat of the pants feel. But with the advent of technology and especially instrumentation, where they put, instruments and sensors and all that on the vehicles, you couldn't BS. The drivers couldn't BS anymore because everything that was done with computers was repeatable, right? And the engineers were saying, hey, look, I don't care what you want in this vehicle. This is the platform that we know will make your car the fastest. We've proven it in the wind tunnel. We've proven it on the pull down and shaker rigs. And this is what you need to learn how to drive. And a lot of these guys that came up old school, they couldn't do it. It's like, I can't feel the right rear, or I need more, spring in the left front. No, you can't do that because that will upset the platform and you won't go fast. And so these kids that basically are, like I said, learning off of, their video games or their simulators, if they're, serious about it, they're not intimidated by technology. They know that this is the right way to do it. They embrace the computers and all that kind of stuff. And they go out there and gain the experience that it took us, the old school guys, a long time through the school of hard knocks to get, because they can basically change whatever they want to on the computer, go right back out there and run it. And so, oh, okay, now I see how that was better, right? And so even now they got these huge, expensive simulators for all the manufacturers, whether it be Dodge or Ford or General Motors, 6-7-figure simulators where it does everything that you'll experience in the race car, right? And so that's why they don't really have 3-day, 4-day weekends anymore, where you showed up with your camper like you were talking about and enjoyed a long weekend. These are like 1- and 2-day events because everything's been proven back at the shop, back through the telemetry and back through the simulation. All they're doing there at the track is proving it out. That's all they're doing. They're proving it out. The races are typically won and lost back at the shop before the vehicles are even unloaded from the hauler.
Yeah, the Thursday night practice to make sure that your car adapted to the tracks, and then you went out Friday for qualifying, and then you tweaked it. Yeah, all that's gone.
Happy hour. There's no such thing as happy hour. I mean, none of that stuff. So it's a very different vibe. And I'm not going to get into all the technological aspects of it, but the car that NASCAR came out with, this Gen 7 car, whatever you want to call it, is basically a sports car. It is a sports car dressed up to look like a stock car. Why do I say that? Because it's not carbureted, it's fuel injected. The transmission is not right behind the engine. It is a transaxle behind the rear axle. That's what's shifting now. It's not like, even though you're pulling the shift lever inside the cockpit, one thing too, you're not doing an H pattern anymore. You're upshifting by pulling it back, and you're downshifting by pushing it forward, because it's it's a sports car road racing gearbox, both in terms of the gears in the back behind the axle, as well as what you're pushing as far as the shifter. And then it's not a Ford like 9-inch rear end anymore. It's like basically almost independent suspension off of the transaxle. Now it's a sports car made to look like a stock car.
It almost sounds like a race car. Cruise is a cruise control car now, almost. Because, I'm thinking when I first started watching, they had the okay, I'm dating myself, but the clutch and the all of that. But I've watched it the other day, and I could not pick out 2 drivers that I knew. And I'm like, that was in less than a year's time since I was slowed up because of working. But I'm like, where'd everybody go?
Yeah. Who are all these kids?
Where'd they go? And how did they get into the upper league that fast? And then where did everybody else go? And then you start hearing the commentating, and I was like, oh, there they are.
Yeah, there they are. They're in the booth now.
Yeah, they was like, oh, really? Man. But before I let you go, when you were talking about your dad took you to the track, that's what happened to me. Because when I first met my husband, he was, a big NASCAR person. And I was like, why are you watching this? What is the purpose of this? Every Sunday you watching this and we can't go shopping or whatever. So then when we got married and bought the house, I couldn't go spend the money every Sunday, like I was doing. So I was at home, and there was Rusty Wallace. I was like, oh, look, let's watch, Rusty's what we watching. So I followed, Rusty. Still didn't kind of get the concept. A friend of mine's, this is like you said, when it was big, she had a Greyhound bus that they would rent and fill it up and take people to Richmond. She said, hey, I got a couple extra tickets. Come on, go with us. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I might as well see what it's about. I'm at the fence, and a car goes past me. Ponytail blows back. I'm like, I'm hooked. I got so hooked into it that I surpassed my husband. Wow. I was introducing him to drivers, and he was like, how did this happen? And Sam Bass was my partner in crime. Still get crushed behind that, because I met Sam at one of his he had a marathon, and all the drivers was coming through when he was right across from the right hand side of the track at his gallery. And my husband said, how did this happen? How did I be the fan and then you end up? And then he's like, and now you have a shirt that says Ed Heads? I was like, yeah, I'm an Ed Head. I'm a Carl Edwards fan. I'm an Ed Head. So yeah, that's how I got hooked the same way. It's just like you did, even if you saw it on TV. And I tell people, you have to go. Yeah. You have to go, because I never did understand it. And yeah, I'm still a fan. I just don't know who racing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally understand. It's not like it used to be. And, you're right. You have to experience it once, and you'll get a real appreciation for it. I mean, everybody who I've ever taken to the track, through different organizations, and I've spoken to the folks that are there in their groups, they're like, man, we're so happy that we came. They just had no idea, because TV just doesn't do it justice. You, like you were saying, how your, ponytail, whatever, is blowing in the wind. Yeah. You just don't know what it's like, what it feels like to have 40 cars going by you, blowing your hat off your head, and, hair flying or whatever. And the sound, you feel it in your chest and all that stuff. I
never wore earbuds. I never put anything in my ears just so I could, and I had smut on my face when I leave, from Richmond. I'm like, yeah, I went to the races, you wipe your forehead and it's all, yeah.
But, well, that's kind of how I became a fan when my dad took me at 8 years old. I was like, I got to do this. This is something I got to be a part of, and I want to drive them. And you know, my story is one of, it took a long time to get there, to become a professional racer at 40 years of age, but that's what I wound up doing. And, you know, I wrote about it, and that's what Winning in Reverse is. So I hope some of your listeners might go out and grab it and see what it was all about.
Oh, I'm going to post the book and the link to purchase with the oh yeah, we're going to have you covered.
We're
going to make sure we're going to move some books tonight.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what we're going to do. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me. It means a lot. Your view on the sport as an African American male means a lot, because, you know, people will assume, oh, he's all right, you know, he, you know, made it through or whatever. But to hear it and to know that it wasn't peaches and cream. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I mean, we see you smiling, but, you know, like you said, everybody can smile, but you don't know what's going on behind the smile. And to know how you got there from a little bitty kid, and you had to basically put it on pause for a little bit to earn the money, to get what you needed, to put yourself in a position to race. Some people would have put their dreams on pause and not go back. So thank you for letting us know that we can, no matter what our age is, go back and chase it.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure talking with you. I've enjoyed it.
I appreciate you, and thank you. And, you know, I'll bug you for something again.
I knew you will.
All right. Thanks, dear. Have a good night.
All right. You too. Bye now.
Goodbye.